Good morning. Welcome to Pan Radio. I'm glad you've joined us this morning in a very special edition as we interview Laura Giles, Pan. I'm Rick West, and today Laura and I are going to explore the idea of seeing mental illness as a spiritual illness. As most of you know, in addition to hosting this weekly podcast, Laura Giles is a practicing licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Richmond, Virginia. She's also the author of several books, obviously, about animism, one called Angel Whispering, How to Talk to Your Spirit Guides, and one called How to Be a Panist, a guide to creating a modern animist lifestyle. Additionally, she facilitates spiritual tours to destinations around the world. We all know her as an original thinker who's been thinking about the ideas that we're going to talk about today for some time, and who wants to explore ideas around how to offer better support for people suffering mental illnesses. Laura recently shared an article from the Mad in America website. It was written by Catherine Duclos, describing Catherine's experiences with bipolarity, both within the conventional medical setting, which pretty much means medication, and with a variety of alternative approaches. And Laura has some fascinating insights to share with us about this today. But before we start, let's take a moment and share our gratitude. As animists, we know that the universe teems with the life force. We're grateful for the life that pours out of the stars and weaves together this incredible tapestry we call reality. We thank the archetypal elements for their gifts. We thank the earth for stability and prosperity. We thank the water for bringing the seeds of life. We thank the air for the eternal flow, and the fire for creating eternal change. We ask our guides to help us today as we speak, to help us find our inner wisdom. We call upon the messenger to ensure that our words are strong and to the point, and to keep a watchful eye on the marvelous technology that makes this podcast possible. Thank you all. To all we extend our deepest gratitude. Thank you. Okay then, Laura Giles. Laura, how are you doing this morning?
I am fabulous. What a wonderful introduction. Thanks for that, Rick. And it's so weird to be on this side of the podcast. But I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for hosting.
Yeah, we've kind of flipped the script today. The interviewer is the interviewee, and that's kind of cool. And it's because it's a topic that you know a great deal about, and I'm pretty much a layperson in this, so I'm going to ask general questions, and you kind of tell us, you give us the feedback from a more professional perspective. So let's just dive in. Laura, okay. Is mental illness a spiritual illness?
I think everything's spiritual. I think you do too, because we're animists, and everything is holistic, and there's really no way to separate out what's mental, physical, emotional. Even though we talk about the elements as being separate things, they're all everywhere. It's kind of like, we have sovereignty and connection. So, yeah, you are a single person, but you're also part of the web. And that's kind of how I look at mental illness. And I think probably because I'm an animist and that's just my worldview, but that's the way that I've always practiced it as a professional.
Excellent. Well, I think I'm sure we're going to talk more about this article as it came up, but in the article that we're referred to by Catherine, I think it's Duclos, I'm not sure, but she talks a great deal about this notion of spiritual and mental illness. So I thought maybe we could start by, can you give sort of just a ballpark definition? When we're talking about mental illness, what are we talking about? And when we're talking about spiritual illness, what are we saying?
So for me, mental illness is a Western construct. So the way that I learned it, and I don't know if this is true, but it sounds true to me, is that when in Christian spirituality, God is at the center of anything, and only God can heal. So in order for physicians to be able to treat people, they had to separate it out and say, well, God is taking care of your spiritual life, and a doctor can deal with your body. And I believe that's where the separation came. And then, when Freud came in 100 years ago, that was the first time they ever talked about mental illness as being a separate thing. That was the birth of psychology, of seeing, well, these are psychological illnesses versus physical illnesses. And while there have been breakthroughs in both of those, I think where it all falls down is when you stop seeing these things as interconnected. So in Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, this division never happened. So when you're treating depression, say, like from an acupuncture perspective, they do look at everything. They look at what are you eating. They look at your lifestyle. They look at what are your family dynamics. They look at how much sunshine are you getting. What herbs do you need? All of that is involved in your treatment planning and to help you to live a more healthy lifestyle. And that's really what it's about. It's about fixing your lifestyle so that you can live more in harmony with nature. So to go back to your question about what's the difference between that and spiritual, it's kind of that same line. It's like, where does the line end and begin? And I think with the way that I approach it is you can look at a person through many, many different lenses, and you can enter into treatment on a whole different bunches of levels. So I'm looking at what are you eating. If you're eating a Western diet, well, that needs to be fixed, because if your body doesn't have the energy to make the change, we're physical beings, it's not going to happen. So more and more and more, because our food is becoming more and more toxic, I start there. Even if they have depression, even if they have anxiety, it's like, what is your body doing? And sometimes that'll clear it up. So when we say a spiritual illness, it's just that it's showing up in a way that we can't track. So there's no, nothing physical going on. Your blood pressure's fine. Your sugar's fine. And that's when they call me. or let's say that the therapist can't help. And then they say, oh, well, it must be spiritual. I think that's what's going on, because there's a lot of people now who have lots of autoimmune stuff, and they can't find a reason. Why is this happening? Who knows? So then they go to the spiritual person they call the shaman in and be like, okay, well, now I can help you. Or it's an exorcism, something like that, and now the priest can help you. But I really think it's all interrelated.
Well, one of the things, just from my own personal perspective as a layperson dealing with the medical establishment, the one thing I've noticed about I kind of want you to speak to the quote mental illness section of this, but just going to a doctor for regular things, they seem to treat symptoms and not causes. They don't seem to spend a lot of time trying to figure out what makes things happen. That's kind of what you were just talking about. But how is that true in the way we treat mental illness as well, or what we're? I think we need a better term for that, but for the minute, let's call it mental illness. Is it true that the medical establishment is looking more at symptoms and not root causes? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So the psychology industry is based on a medical model. So you come in, you have these symptoms, and based on these symptoms, they give you a diagnosis, and then based on your diagnosis, they give you a treatment, which often includes drugs. That's what Western medicine is good for, drugs and treating symptoms. Yeah. So your symptoms do go away, but your underlying cause is still there. And that's never the way that I've looked at it. There is a cause for everything. And if you don't treat the cause, then you just hang on to those symptoms, and you can pass it on. So then it becomes intergenerational issues and not just your issue. And which I think Animism does a beautiful job of addressing that, because if you're living well, then you're cleaning up your stuff, and you're not passing it along to anybody, not in your neighbors, your family, your descendants, none of that. And I think that's part of the reason why we have such problems now, is because we're not cleaning up our stuff. Lots of people aren't animists, and we aren't taking care of the earth in the way that an animist would, and we're not living in relationship with anything. I think loneliness is a huge component to all sorts of problems, so we're just not connected.
In your practice, do you talk to people about their ancestry and about tapping into ancestry and tapping into greater spirits, or is that something you just can't do in a clinical setting?
I do. I don't know if my clients, some of them don't have any idea who I am. It's just like, oh, you're on the list, you're close to my office or something like that, and they just pop in. Most of them do know, though, in advance where I'm coming from. And it's totally cool. Yes, we definitely talk about that. Everybody's not open to it, but one of the things in trauma, which is my area of expertise, is that they are talking more about that. Trauma is about being holistic and living in the body. It is about intergenerational trauma. We do understand epigenetics now, so the science is catching up with the spirituality, and there's so much more overlap than there used to be. And to me, that's such an exciting world to live in when you can talk to your peers in a way that they can understand it, finally.
Could you just real briefly define the term epigenetics? It's an interesting use.
So, so there's this, epigenetics is about stuff that's not DNA. So you can learn things and then pass that learning on to your kids. So I think this was monkeys. I'm not sure if I'm not good on details. If you listen to me at all, you know I can't tell a story. But, and I'm not good with details. But the gist of it is that scientists looked at some monkeys on an island and taught them to do something. Let's say that they taught them how to crack nuts. Mm-hmm. And then they looked at monkeys on another island, and those monkeys on the other island learned how to do that too. So that's without it being taught. So that's a form of epigenetics. It's like, I don't know, this learning gets transmitted.
But it's cultural transmission of knowledge that you talk about this a great deal in a lot of ways. Yeah. So, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, in the article that we're talking about, Mr. Claus talks about at some length about this oscillation between connection and separation, and the tension that arises from it and plays out through our lives. She says, if I can find the quote, she says, "We're all a part of the wholeness from which we come, and as such, we both feel the separation of being a part and of the connection, and of being a part of the connection and a part of separation." In other words, what she's suggesting is that we have this tendency to move from, we oscillate between the frequencies of connection and separation. Does that register with you, and do you see that in terms of some way to help people with the crisis that we're talking about?
Yeah. So for those of y'all that don't know, Rick and I started Pan Society together. And Rick, if you remember, when we were talking about what are the parameters for a church that doesn't have any dogma, and we were talking so much, we spent a lot of time talking about sovereignty and connection. And that's exactly it, the separation and connection. And both of those things have to happen, and they both need to be balanced. So I don't mean 50-50, but sometimes you're more doing your own thing, and sometimes you're more into the we, but they have to work in like the cycle of life. Everybody needs both, and we're such a disconnected society. And I think, to me, that is the biggest contributor to mental illness, is that so many people are just so disconnected. People are social creatures. We're not meant to go through life alone. And if you look at the way that we rear our children, the first thing we do is we put them in a nursery in a bin by themselves, which is awful. You know, humans need touch. If you look at any other animal, they don't do that. The first thing a mom goat does, for example, is they're going to lick them clean, and they're stimulating them to get them to move and to breathe, and they're next to them all the time. And we put them in a little bin in the nursery, and then they go sleep in a bassinet most of the time. And then, you know, they're in their own room. If you don't have your own room as a kid, then it's like you're deprived. But in tribal cultures, the mom wears the baby until the baby's weaned often. I mean, that's a big kid to be wearing them. And we're touch deprived. We just don't have the same connections. And I think that makes us so healthy from jump.
Okay. Well, she also talks about the concept of the spiritual emergency. Just real briefly, my background is in anthropology, at least in part, and they refer to, the old studies at least, used to refer to this process they call liminalism, or the liminal state, where you're sort of in between two worlds and basically anything can happen next. I kind of see this dance of connectedness and separation as that's kind of the universal dance. That's the duality dance. And I think we kind of do go back and forth between these things, and I think it's necessary. What she suggests in the article is that in the case of mental illness, the separation portion becomes way out of balance and becomes more critical or more fundamental to the individual than the connection piece, and that creates as she calls it, a spiritual emergency. Is that, and do you think, is that fundamental to understanding how to support people who have mental issues?
I do, because if you look at so all of that, what we just said, what you just said, is all true, and then you add to it the piece of that we are so individual focused in our country, and I think in the Western world, but less so. I think we're the supreme at it. That from the time you're little, if you have any influence at all, you're setting your kids up for academic success and being right and knowing things, and it's very mental and it's very individualistic. We're not teaching people how to succeed in life. So we're not teaching them how to cook. We're not teaching them how to fail. There's lots of failure in life, and if you're not equipped to fail, a lot of people that I see they just don't know how to fail, so they don't try, or if a failure is the end of the world, because we're so success driven and so individual driven, and so a lot of times people don't know how to have relationships. There's real fundamental things that we are not teaching kids. We're not teaching kids how to value themselves and how to connect and how to have relationships. So we got a hookup culture because people don't know how to date. And they think it's just about me and my convenience, and you're not fitting in so well, so I'll just use you for sex because, we both need that, and then forget about the rest of it, which leads to more disconnection and loneliness. So I think it's pervasive throughout the society. It's not just one thing, but it absolutely adds to the spiritual and the mental breakdown of a person because the soul fragments. That's like trauma. I think people think trauma as... Why do I think what is?
That the society, that we choose fragmentation of the individual over cohesion.
Well, if you look at the history of the United States, so we came here, the early people that came here, so not talking about the people who were already here, came here fleeing something, fleeing religious persecution, fleeing the oppression of the aristocracy, and people wanted the opportunity to be their own people, to make their own success, to make their own way in the world. And for the first time, I think, in history, it didn't matter what your name was. It didn't matter who your parents were. You could do anything. And I think it's an overcorrection. I think those are all wonderful, wonderful things. But I think it's an overcorrection and an over-reliance on that. So a lot of people came here because they were traumatized and oppressed. And looking for safety, it's like, well, if I can make enough money, if I can make a name for myself, if I can have these things and these things and these things, I will be safe. Instead of, if I find a place where I can belong and the people where I can belong, which a lot of other cultures do, then I can be safe, or at least spring from that. We don't have roots. We don't have grounding. And you can never be safe if you don't have that. So you need to have that connection because that's where those roots come from. Right.
Yeah, it does seem that way, that we've, you and I have had this discussion before, that what has been created in the Western world out of this material model, out of, frankly, the Cartesian model from 6 centuries ago, is this amazing, truly awesome technological fantasy world that surrounds us. And in some ways it is magnificent, but it has seemed to have left this ability to cohere in a more social fashion behind, and certainly not always for the best of the individual. I know. Well, let's sort of a related thing here. Let's back to treatment for a minute. Is there a legitimate role for medication in treatment?
Oh, sure. I've seen some people who, I think once you get beyond a certain point, you need somebody to prop you up. You just don't have the energy. You don't have the whatever it takes to do it on your own, and I think medication is a way to do that. I'm not anti-medicine. I don't think that is a cure for sure. So when I'm talking about medication, like if I've seen people who are in the throes of a divorce and you're just, it's ridiculous and the stress and all, and medication can take the edge off so you can function. Or if you're like schizophrenic and you just need those voices to quiet down so you can just hear yourself, I think medication is fantastic for that. Okay. It's not going to cure anything, but I think it can take the edge off so you can do something else to help yourself.
Yeah. The question I wanted to follow up with, you kind of touched on earlier, but let's get into it in some depth. What's the role of nutrition and sort of exercise and sort of physical health, and how does that play into mental health?
I think it's all related. We don't go outside. We don't have a relationship with nature. And we don't eat food anymore. We eat food-like substances. And you can't function as a natural creature if you're not in sync with nature. So you got to eat real food. You got to, interact with the world and feel the heartbeat of the earth. And I like sleeping on the earth because you can't get any closer to it than that. I don't know if you need to do that, but our ancestors certainly did. And, I think it makes a difference. We have podcasts and videos about forest bathing and moon bathing, and, lots of people already sunbathe. So these kinds of things I think are fundamental. They just put us back in touch with the heartbeat of nature. And we don't do that in our air-conditioned and climate-controlled boxes. We don't even touch the earth with our feet. Yeah,
that's true. How much traction does this sort of conversation get with patients? I mean, do people hear this or?
No, I wish more people understood. So here's my experience with that. So I'll talk to people about nutrition, and they're just like, "Oh, you're not a doctor. You're not a nutritionist." And then they'll go and they'll spend money on a doctor and a nutritionist who tells them exactly the same thing. So I get it. I don't think people think of their therapist as dietitians and all of that. But to me, if your therapist is not talking to you about food, which is so fundamental, then she's not qualified, period. That is something that I've been hitting on for a long time. It is mainstream instruction now when you get your continuing education. If you're not learning about food, I think you're doing yourself and your clients a disservice.
Fair enough, yeah. One of the upshots of what we were talking about in terms of people coming west and suddenly not having to have a past to have a future, one of the things, that is a long story, but one of the things that's grown out of that is this sort of fake appeal to authority, that only authorities can talk about a specific little piece of reality. And that comes back to interconnectedness. We have kind of delivered our connectedness over to something that's not us. Very interesting when that happens. How about another topic that's come up in the last few days with regard to this is entheogenics. Is there a place for plant medicine in healing?
I think so. I definitely think so. I mean, it's been used in many cultures around the world for who knows how long, forever, because people have a relationship with those plants. They're local to those people, and I think it's their relationship that makes it work. So, and if you take things out, so the Western way is to synthesize things, isolate things, and be like, okay, if this is a compound that works, then we're just going to isolate that and make a bioidentical chemical thing of that, and then use that because we can do that cheaply and quickly. And then they'll be like, okay, this is what you need. And that's not the way that food works. So I'm always going to go for food before supplements, although I'm a fan of supplements as well.
Okay.
When you eat food, there's all kinds of things that are like cofactors. So it's not a vitamin, it's not a mineral, but it'll help you to make enzymes or make all these little connections in your body that your body needs to function well. And when you're isolating stuff like that, it's not going to function the same. You might get a result, like aspirin is going to help with your pain, but it's not willow bark. And when you're isolating, I really like, thank God, that marijuana is becoming legal everywhere. I think it's a great medicine. I don't know that I like it synthesizing that, though. And I think that when you take plant medicine out of its cultural context and out of the relationship, it may work for you, but it's not the same thing. And I think to me, if you're not getting the relational piece, and if you're not doing your own work, then how much are you really healing?
What is it you think about the plant medicine that makes that synthesization happen? Is there something in plant medicine that's not in synthetic medicine? I bring this up because I've noticed that there's a pretty radical movement right this minute among science to create fake grown proteins that aren't part of an animal body, but are food in the sense that exactly like you're talking about, they've created the synthetic proteins, and I wonder about the same question comes up for that as it does for medicine. Is there something in a plant medicine, do you think, that creates this synthesis, and any idea what it might be or how it might work?
I think there's a lot of things that we can't quantify and identify. Like if you look at the brain, we don't know how it works. There's all kinds of things going on in
consciousness.
There. You know, and
the word consciousness, nobody knows. Seriously, nobody knows.
And if you look at DNA, there's a lot of stuff. I don't know what they call it, but there's like, that's just empty stuff. It doesn't do anything. It does something. There's a reason why it's there.
Yeah, the universe is 94% empty. Yes, I know.
Exactly. And you need that empty space. So I think it's so foolish and so egotistical to think that you're going to, isolate these things and make these things like the stuff doesn't matter. Everything matters.
Right.
I don't know. I just think there's something really crazy about does it work? Can you make a synthetic thing and get a result from it? Yeah, you can, but what about the life force?
The life force. That's kind of what I was getting at, yes.
Yeah. There's a life force in it that comes from the sun and the earth and the process of living that you can't get from mass manufacturing it and putting chemicals together. It's not the same thing.
No, it's not. I totally agree.
They have sex robots, and they look like people. If you've ever seen them, they look like people. They respond like people. And I read an article about people like wanting to marry their sex robot because they're totally agreeable. But that's
totally creepy.
It's creepy.
The food thing is creepy too. I mean, I'm making proteins in the lab. It's just a little bizarre. I'm not down for that just yet. I don't know.
No, I don't like drinking food. I
want the life force. I do. I want the life force in anything we do. Changing directions just a little bit here. I know you are a fan of C.G. Jung, and I certainly am a fan of C.G. Jung. I want to talk about that for just a minute. Is there a place for Jungian therapy in your worldview in terms of mental health? And by Jungian therapy, I mean broadly bringing the interior to the exterior, basically working through doing the, quote, shadow work that goes through Jungian therapy. Is that a legitimate way to approach mental illness?
Oh, my God. I think if you're not doing that, then you're missing a gigantic piece of sovereignty and connection. So sovereignty is getting to know yourself. And there's so much that we, especially in Western society, suppress because it's not acceptable. I have to fit in. I have to look like this. There's so many have-tos. And we learn from such a young age to suppress all kinds of things. As soon as your mom tells you be a good boy, you're just like, whoop. I must not be doing something that's good. And then you start censoring. And all of these things go into shadow. And I think that the archetypes and the way that he has created it is just such a beautiful way of understanding yourself and the world. And, these archetypes are in stories. They're everywhere throughout time in all cultures. And so you see them. We see them in movies. That's why we enjoy movies. And it makes it so relatable. And when we can see that, then we can be the best in ourselves. We can be the best expression of ourselves. And it can give us courage to go through things that are new to us and we don't know how to do. And I think for so many reasons, if you're not doing shadow work, then you're not really getting to know who you are in a deep, deep way. I mean, not to say that there aren't other ways. I think this is a great way. And you're missing out on the experience of living. because you're at the center of your world. There's only one you, and if you are not bringing yourself, the best self forward, then you're cheating the world, and you're cheating yourself and everybody else of the best connection with you, with your existence on Earth. I think it's so important.
And to create that best person, can you just speak for a minute to sort of how you might converge common sort of current medical practice with what you would like to see happen? In other words, what specific changes what would you make to the established medical procedure?
That's kind of hard. Because I don't think it's really in current medical procedure.
Okay.
But right. I think like dream work, so it's all the stuff, the soft, squishy stuff that you can't measure. And I think that's why Western medicine doesn't like it. But dream work is so powerful. I mean, that's a connection to your soul. That's a connection to the what do you call the collective unconscious. That's a connection to the universe. And everybody has that every night for free. Why would you not use that? And just like mandalas, what he did a lot of work with that. Your unconscious is in that drawing that you create, and you can see it. It's a map. Why would you not use that? I think there's no better authority on an individual than these things. And if you can bring them out into the world, then they're there for you to use, for yourself, for everything that you ever want to create, so that you can be your best self, so that you can see this darkness and run into that and like, oh, what is this? And be compassionate with it. Be accepting of it, because everybody has that. That's part of you. And I think that's part of the juiciness.
Just out of curiosity, when you meet a brand new patient, where is your head? What's the first? What are you looking for when someone comes to you? And I mean, it's a broad question, but sort of what's your process?
Well, I hate to say, but I take insurance, and so the first thing that I do is to satisfy the insurance requirement and do the intake and just ask them a bunch of questions. Okay. Just to kind of get a broad overview. I don't think that's the best way to start, because it's kind of like an interrogation. I mean, I do try to make it as conversational as possible. It's really not the best. That's requirement. And I think it's important, too, because as a professional, you do want a framework to begin. You do need a treatment plan. You do need to know what's going on. I wish that it could be more conversational, more relaxed, but I do see the need for it. And, I like structure, so it's okay. It's okay. But what I'm looking for really, though, and I think it's easy to see, is the light inside. Because if you can see the light inside of people, so there's this thing, I don't know. So when we're with other people, then we're having reactions to them, and we make these little micro movements in our face that they then kind of duplicate back. So it's very, very small. You probably won't notice that it's happening, but it happens. And this is how people connect. So if you're looking at somebody and thinking, oh, I'm so repulsed by this person, they know. Because they're making your little micro movements in their face. And so if you're conscious enough, most of us are not all that conscious, you know exactly what they think of you. And when you see somebody and you see their light first, then your face registers that. So you're showing them, oh, I see your light. And then like, oh, you see my light. And then they do it back, and then it's pleasant. And I think if we approach people in that way versus what's wrong with you, right. Or if we're reflecting our own self-doubt and unworthiness, I think that's a problem too, is that often that's what we're doing. We're wearing a mask that hides all of that instead of showing our light.
Literally these days.
Yeah, really. So I think the more that we can show up with our light, and the more that we can reflect back somebody's light, even if they don't see it for themselves, the healthier we become as societies, because we're all mirrors for each other.
Yeah. Okay. No, great answer. I don't want to just limit this to my little set of questions, so I kind of want to open it up to you. Is there anything else you would like to say about the topic in general?
As far as like the spiritual stuff, I see a lot of people, and I don't know why. I don't know if it's because people feel comfortable saying stuff, or I don't know why. But I think that if you've got some spiritual stuff going on, well, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. If you think you have a receptive therapist to talk about it with, then go ahead and share that stuff. Because a lot of times, I mean, I've had clients like for a year, and, you know, we're doing good work, but then they'll drop a bomb on me that's like spiritual or paranormal in nature. And I'm like, why didn't you lead with that? We could have just saved so much time, because those things are important.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I also run a meetup group, and we've done meetups on my paranormal experience, my ET experience, my unexplained experience, my spiritual experience, and they're always packed. And people have all these stories, and they don't have anybody to tell them to, because they think, well, if I say this, then somebody's going to think I'm crazy. And I think this whole thing of I can't do this because somebody will think that I'm crazy is what limits us as society from accepting the stuff that we can't explain. So paranormal is just what science can't explain. Doesn't mean it's not real. But these spiritual experiences, these magic, these magical experiences, those things are real. And I think you run it by your own filter. I know some people don't believe in anything. If you can't measure it, it's not real. That's cool. But for me, my filter is, did I have an experience? Yeah, then it's real. Even if you didn't see it, it's real to me. So,
I believe it was Arthur Clarke said that. Oh, sorry. Arthur Clarke said magic is is any technology that's sufficiently advanced that we don't understand it. There's nothing paranormal about it. It's just advanced tech. So I totally agree with that.
I don't think anything's paranormal. If you perceived it, it's normal.
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent.
So I think those things need to be brought out more. We need to talk about that stuff more. I mean, if you look at Black Elk, who was the Lakota spiritual leader, his stuff is just, it's crazy, the visions and stuff that he had. He kept that all to himself.
Flying to England and all, great stuff.
Yeah. I mean, we could have some really beneficial mystic in our midst who never says anything because, I don't want to be crazy.
Oh. Do you ask those questions? Oh, yeah. Do you ask those questions of people? Do you ask, have you had paranormal experiences or anything like that when you're doing therapy? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because sometimes...
well, I can see how it would make a huge difference, yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes they're yes. Especially if there's, so I'm going to go to the most logical reason first. Okay, you don't feel really well. How are you sleeping? What are you eating? What's your stress like? I'm going to go to that first. But if we exhaust stuff and it's like it's a mystery, well, then we need to look a little farther. And it could be something, you could have some past life stuff going on. That stuff carries over. So I think we need to be talking about that stuff. It's real. Yeah.
Well, certainly the first order of questions is, are you taking care of yourself? I mean, that's obvious enough, and I can see how you would want to get to the bottom of all that. But beyond that do you respect we were talking about Jung a minute ago. Do you respect your interiority? Do you respect yourself enough to bring your truth to the fore? And I know those are that has. I'm a layperson. I don't have any training in this, but that's got to be a huge question in that
for sure.
In any kind of clinical setting. Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that you're thinking about that. I've never dealt with the what we like to call Rockefeller medicine in terms of a mental illness, but I suspect that it doesn't really deal with very much like standard health care. They just want to know what's wrong. Here's something to fix it, and go away. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
And I have to figure that mental crises pretty much get the same treatment. In fact, that's what DeClus was talking about in her article, is that she would very much like to be seen as an actual individual with actual thoughts instead of some compilation of genetics and that can be treated. Yeah. Just to kind of wrap this up, can you put this? We've talked around it quite a bit, but let's focus on how since we're all animists, and since this is sort of an animist podcast and what have you, how does animism relate to correcting mental issues that you might run across in your life?
So it's kind of weird that I didn't put this together until way into my career. But, I'm always asking myself questions, and I have a challenging clientele. I work with trauma. And I like that because every time somebody brings me something I've never seen before, it gives me juice and gives me some way to grow, something to find out. And so that's kind of how I develop my body of knowledge, is just keep asking questions, looking. And, everybody has stuff, and everybody has intergenerational stuff. And when I look at my family, we should be just as jacked up as anybody else because we have our share of stuff too. Mm-hmm. And I think, honestly, the reason why we're not is because of animism. Because what animism has given me is that those roots. I know who I am. I know who my people are. I'm connected. I know people don't believe me when I say this, but I've never felt lonely a day in my life, ever. I've never felt disconnected from people, from my ancestors, from the earth, from the trees. I mean, anything can happen, and stuff has happened. I've not, I'm happy most of the time, but I've had, like anybody, I've gone through stuff, and I've never lost my center. I've never lost that. And I think when your animism is in your bones, and you know who you are, then I don't know. It would take, knock on wood. I'm not trying to tempt fate, but it would take a whole lot to knock me off of that center and give me a mental crisis that, that I don't know who I am, or I'm in a spiritual thing. Something really, really drastic would have to happen to take that away from me. I think when you're that deeply connected, then you're going to be okay.
Yeah, do you think there's a way to teach that? Is there a way to transmit that to others so that they find the spark, or is that, do you have to, or are you born with it?
No, I don't think it's cultural. And I think the problem with modern animism is we have individual here who's animist, individual here, individual here, individual here, and we don't have the culture. I think I got it because it's in my culture. So my mom never said this stuff to me. It's just the way that we were raised. And it's like, I don't know, there's all kinds of things that are transmitted culturally that we don't even think about. And animism is one of them.
Well, if you're born to a Calvinist family of farmers in Indiana who don't believe in any of this stuff, is there a way to get? And now you come around and you say, I didn't like that. I want to be something different. Is there a way to work with that person to bring them closer to an animistic point of view?
I think one of the reasons people ask me about books, you can read a book. But you're going to get it on an intellectual level, and I think that's important. But I think you have to have the lived sense of it. So, like when we have our Holy Day stuff, come to that. Or come to somebody else's thing. Go to a Native American thing. Go to I don't know, whatever, some animist culture thing. Live that, and then ask for context. And I'm saying ask for context because there's going to be a bunch of different things that is the glue to it, that's invisible to you, that you don't understand, and you're going to make mistakes. And I'm not a cultural appropriation person. I think everything belongs to everybody. But I am a cultural appropriation person when it comes to this. When you don't know what the glue means, then you can miss the magic. That's my problem with the plant medicine, is that people see that, well, I had this great experience, and you think that's the magic. That's not the magic.
Right.
That's not the magic at all.
Right.
And so I think you need both, the lived experience of it and the understanding of what it is that you're living by having these conversations. That's why we talk so much. That's why we have salons. That's why we have the podcast. That's why we do this. All of this is to bring people in and help them to understand and give them a foundation. So I'm talking about this. Somebody else may have a different idea. So back to your question about hierarchy. We don't have a hierarchy. Everybody has their wisdom. And a child may say something that's just hits you way in a more profound way, and it's totally different from what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I think you need to listen to everybody. That's why I'm always asking, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think. So.
Well,
yeah,
Laura,
get
this has been
engaged.
great.
I think that's the way to get it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, this has been great. You've provided great insight into all this, and we thank you for that, for the work and all, for the work you do. Is there? Well, let's close out like this. Can you kind of tell people where they might find you, where they might find Pan, where they might find things about animism, and anything about your practice that you care to share? Kind of tell us where you are and how to find you.
So I'm at lauragiles.net. Super easy. I'm not accepting any new clients though, so sorry about that. But we have pansociety.net is our website. We're on pretty much all the social media. You can find us on your favorite one. Like I said, if you have a position, we definitely want to hear from you. Come on and weigh in on our private Facebook group. You can pose questions on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, the podcast. We love your feedback. Love hearing from you. And I'm going to close this out by sending gratitude to the elements and our loving, helping ancestors for being here. I thank all of you for joining us on this edition of Modern Animism Radio. And don't forget to donate. We need your financial support. And you can do that at our website at pansociety.net or buymeacoffee.com/pansociety. So thank you all for tuning in. I'm Laura Giles with Rick West. And see y'all next week.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. Bye-bye now.